Welcome back for that brief moment. Now we're going to have our closing keynote, Bridging the Future. Where do we go from here? And joining me in a conversation is Ben Pinnington, who's the founder of Polaris Media and an author who just produced Making Waves, a PR guide for the maritime industry. Ben, thanks so much for joining me at Shipping Insight.
Thanks, Carleen. My video isn't working for some reason, but it's nice to be here nonetheless. It is
there
working.
You go. Ben, we know that shipping is the engine of global trade, transporting more than 90% of the world's goods and services. How then can we be invisible, except when a container ship is blocking the Suez Canal, ship congestion is threatening Christmas, or oil is in the water?
Well, I think, we're an old school industry, Carleen, and historically we've preferred a lower profile. We like to communicate with ourselves in our own bubble. But I think that is increasingly an untenable position. And we see that because of the huge focus now coming on maritime with the decarbonisation agenda. And we're seeing mainstream media take a much closer interest in maritime because it's becoming better understood that maritime is responsible for carbon emissions equivalent to a country the size of Germany, about 3% of global carbon emissions. And this thrusts us sort of into the blinding sunlight of the climate change emergency debate. And I think that means that maritime, it's a wake-up call for maritime. We have to become much more sophisticated with how we approach particularly the mainstream media. And I think, we can do this. I mean, if you look at the trade press is brimming with vitality. We've got probably the best, biggest and most abundant trade press of any industry in the world, and it's brimming with stories of decarbonisation and AI and autonomous shipping, so much. And we now just need to reflect the brilliance of that story into the mainstream. But you see today how the tech industry is putting the Star Trek guy William Shatner into space. I mean, that is a blatant publicity stunt, and it's a very good one. And maritime is up against these tech entrepreneurs who are getting all of this publicity with their space race, and they're really good and exciting about PR and promoting themselves. And maritime, despite having probably the most fascinating heritage of any industry in the world, when you think about Columbus and Magellan and Cook, we've become quite conservative and quite complacent and a little bit, can I say it, dull. And we need to find technicolor and tell our story.
Well, how can we best communicate our value proposition to the general public?
Well, I think, as I say, we've already got that. We've got this terrific story of innovation, and we need to start communicating it with real passion. And we know how much passion is in this industry. You have to walk into a shipyard or a port. This is also an industry underpinned by entrepreneurs. And the tech giants are showing us how entrepreneurs think different. They want to change the world. And we need to find, I think, our entrepreneurs who can be our champions, because, we're too faceless, Carleen. We don't have, it's ridiculous, one of the biggest industries in the world, but who is the face? I mean, there's more known about Columbus than there is about modern day maritime.
No, you're absolutely right, Ben. You're absolutely right. And we talk about our industry being fragmented. And I had a meeting on Monday because in the run-up to COP26, there's been a lot of activity and a lot of conversation amongst industry. And there have been some wonderful initiatives like the International Chamber of Shipping's call to action, submission to IMO, and the Getting to Zero's call to action. And it's talking about how industry is calling on governments to do something. But I we're doing a good enough job of projecting what we are doing as an industry on decarbonization. And part of that is there's a disconnect between the public's understanding of who or what our industry is, if we're even in their thought process. So how do we get their attention, and how do we harmonize the message to the public?
Well, I think, Maritime is not a business to consumer facing industry. We're business to business. So I received an email this week from an airline telling me how they were going to decarbonize over the next 10 years. Maritime doesn't have that luxury. We don't communicate directly to the public. So the only vehicle to do that is the mainstream press. And historically, we haven't been very good at communicating with the mainstream press, very good at communicating with the trade press. And that's why I say we have a terrific story of innovation, and we need to tell that story, and we need to be authentic in how we tell that story, because decarbonizing maritime is not an easy challenge, but it has to be done. And there's many organizations that are putting huge effort, huge resource into this. And we need to promote it because we want to be attracting some of the brightest and best young minds to come and work in maritime. We are not a dinosaur industry. We are an industry of innovation, of adventure. And we have to recover our mojo, I think, Carleen. As I say, if you think about what maritime entrepreneurs and visionaries have achieved historically, we need to tap back into that. We need to refine that passion. And, maybe we can have something like the IMO sponsoring a new green ribbon race across the Atlantic or across the Pacific. Alternative fueled ships racing to set a world record. We need to do something like that to engage the public and engage the media. It can be done. I mean, I've promoted Camel-led Shipyard in Liverpool, one of the most famous shipyards in the UK, and it built the Sir David Attenborough polar ship, and we did 3 events with Sir David Attenborough, one of which was attended by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and we had the national media and international media descending on the shipyard, and we reached an audience of billions. We were broadcasting live on BBC One, ITV to the nation. And this is what we can do in maritime. My experience is the mainstream media is very interested in maritime and is inspired, like everyone who works in maritime, by it, because it is such an inspiring industry. But I think we've got to release the shackles. Decarbonisation is the moment where we can release the shackles and tell our story. And we have to do it, otherwise we won't attract the best minds. And we also then are at risk of a lot of negative headlines if we're not proactively campaigning for hearts and minds in the media, explaining what we're doing. We'll just get attacked for being a dinosaur industry that's complacent and polluting, and that would be an absolute travesty.
I absolutely agree with you. But I think it's going to require a level of transparency that is not does not come naturally to this industry. Now, what I won't agree with you on, and I hope we won't come to blows, but we always describe our industry as being a B2B sector. And historically, that has been true. But I would submit to you that we are becoming a B2B to C industry as the consumer gets closer to the ship. Most recently, we saw an environmental group picket IKEA in Holland demanding that they use ships with low emissions. And how should industry respond to this? This is not customary.
I actually agree with you. That's what I'm trying to say. Decarbonisation is dragging maritime into the mainstream, into the public spotlight. And as we see with these environmental protests, there is now a lot of pressure coming on retailers to clean up the shipping carbon footprints. We see protests in Los Angeles and Seattle to that effect. So, as I say, we just got to be, I think, bold more than anything else, bold with our message that, we are an industry that cares, and, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the Poseidon Principles, which account for 158 billion pounds or dollars worth of lending to ships, this new ESG agenda where ships will be assessed on how they're meeting the United Nations greenhouse gas emissions. These are all vehicles where we can be more transparent and show the journey that we're on, but it has to be authentic for me, Carleen. We cannot be greenwashing. We cannot be purpose washing. The era of businesses existing for shareholder value is emphatically over. And that's why PR, one of the reasons why PR I think is more important and needs to be elevated to the C-suite, because we have to be showing what we're doing. It's not just walking talking. It's walking the walk. PR is about what you do, not just what you say. And so we do need to find ways to be more transparent. And I think the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the Poseidon Principles, are vehicles to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Again, well, for instance, this week we heard a lot about collaboration and harmonization within our industry. And this morning, Mark O'Neill called for one voice to tell shipping's story. And we don't know what that looks like. Also, one of our panelists claimed that partnership is the new disruption. I mean, this would be a profound shift for maritime, but how can we approach this? What's the best way for us to approach this?
Well, I mean, we're certainly seeing it at Polaris. We're promoting more partnerships between our clients, particularly in decarbonisation, how classification societies, flag states, OEMs are working more, and shipping lines are working more together. I think, as I say, we need to communicate. We're very good at communicating that to the maritime press. I mean, the maritime press is full of this stuff. But I think what we're saying is that we need to reach a bigger audience than that. We need to reach real influencers, government influencers, environmental influencers, and ultimately, I think, the public. And we're going to have to be imaginative in how we communicate that story, because it is quite a niche story. And that's why I say, stuff like a new green ribbon challenge across the Atlantic, stuff like that can grab the imagination of the media. As I say, we saw it when we promoted the polar ship being built at Camel Laird, the UK's polar ship. We generated huge amounts of publicity with British Antarctic Survey, trying to reach into the mainstream, educate the public about shipping and Antarctica. So, it can be done. We've got the ingredients to do it, but we do require imaginative ideas, because otherwise it can seem quite esoteric and quite arcane. And we need to find a way to communicate with the public in a way that inspires them.
Absolutely. Ben, tell us a little bit about your book, Making Waves, and tell us a little bit about why you wrote it.
Well, I wrote it out of love for the industry. I've been fascinated by the industry for over 10 years, but also frustration, because I think a lot of maritime businesses are run by engineers or finance people who don't necessarily understand what PR is, what it's about, and how important it is to use PR as a listening tool, not just a broadcasting tool, but a listening tool. So you are in touch and in tune with your stakeholders. And so then PR can be used to shape the strategic direction of the organization. It's not just an add-on to marketing. It's not an expensive luxury. It's not there for communications gloss. It is fundamental to the strategic direction of the organization. So that was really the prime reason why I wrote it, because I felt I couldn't sit in meetings anymore where PR was being used as an on-off tactical tool. It's so much more important than that, and other industries use it very well. But maritime historically has not embraced PR as a strategic tool. And as we're saying with decarbonisation, that changes everything. And so PR is now a lot more important and needs to be in the C-suite and shaping strategic direction.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. And I urge everyone to buy Ben's book, which is available on Amazon. And I'm sure you can also get it by going to the Polaris Media website. Ben, thank you and good luck with your launch.
Thank you. Thank you, Carleen.